Witchcraft is wild.
Oh.
That's just it. It's wild. You have to think of it as just wild. Not even just a wild animal, but just wild altogether.
Everybody, welcome back to the Starry interview series, and today I have a very special guest who is coming for one of the very first times on live view. Well, we're not live, not on interview videos, and this is the wonderful Jaclyn Cherie, who is the creatrix behind the Nephilim Rising. You guys might know the Nephilim Rising on Facebook, but you can also find the Nephilim Rising page, and store and all that good stuff. All the links will be, of course, down below. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm not going to make you introduce yourself because I hate that. I hate doing that. I'm like, yeah. So if you guys don't know who Jaclyn is, I'd be surprised, or at least I'd be surprised if you didn't know who the Nephilim Rising is, because that does very well, very well. And Jaclyn has this incredible energy and sort of, how do you even start to describe? Right, so would you call yourself a witch? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Nephilim Rising deals with all sorts of deep topics when it comes to witchcraft, and there's this energy of resilience and rebellion, which is what we're calling the interview today, and it talks about the good, I don't know how else to put it other than the good stuff when it comes to witchcraft, like the deeper, more interesting, more intricate stuff rather than surface level.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Is that
yeah.
Is that good?
I can't do surface level in anything in my life. So of course, witchcraft is the same way. Yeah. 100%. We're diving deep.
Yeah, absolutely, which is my jam too. So we should be absolutely good here. So we are talking about resilience and rebellion. So I have sent you some questions beforehand, so forgive me everybody, I'm going to read the questions. So I'm going to look over here and be like, put my little Virgo hat on, just so I remember, because my memory is awful. So I have been thinking a lot lately about how many witches embody the energy of rebellion in their lives and in their craft. They have causes they believe in entirely and make every effort to support. And I think this has become more and more of a thing over recent years, especially in America, because America has become more and more aware of how important it is to back political causes, to not be apathetic. I think we're getting there in the UK as well, but particularly I feel like America has been through a rebirthing, shall we call it, by fire. So why do you, in your words, think this is such a pivotal energy or practice behind being a witch and embodying the craft? Why not, and how so?
Well, first off, I have to say that witchcraft is inherently political. And whenever I make that statement, people get so mad because they automatically just assume that I'm talking about like it's Republican or Democrat or something like that. And it's not, no, that's not what I'm saying. It is a political statement to call yourself a witch. Whether you are on a public platform like you and I are, or you are solitary, keeping it entirely to yourself and nobody knows. The moment that you call yourself a witch, you are making a political statement. And I think witchcraft and rebellion and resistance, and especially the resistance that we're seeing here in America, are all intertwined with the politics. I mean, when you time it up, the Trump presidency, people were angry. And the systems that they had looked to beforehand weren't helping them. And so we saw this rise in witchcraft, paganism, Wicca, all different, variations of alternative spirituality, if you will. And people are coming in by the droves.
Mm.
And I think we're just, as you said, at a pivotal moment. And there's a lot of gatekeepers in the craft, in the community, that just, they don't want this wave of newbies. I'm kind of like, bring it on. Like, bring it on, you know what I mean? Like, bring on this new rebellion. I think that they're fiery. They have a lot to bring to the table. And they're passionate, you know, like they're passionate about these huge causes, and they're making waves. You know, and I just, yeah, they're that's what I have to say.
Yeah. So to go back to what you said about it being inherently political to call yourself a witch, I'm going to give my feelings on it, and you can see where yours are, if that's all right with you. So I feel it's inherently political because you're taking a word that has been used, or a title really, that has been used for generations to suppress, to drive fear into the hearts of largely women, not always women, but largely women. And it was a term that historically people didn't adopt. They were midwives, they were healers, they were just poor. Sometimes they were just widows who had come into money and power, and they became targets. And perhaps they were performing magic. In some cases, there's little bits of sort of clues that they might have been, and in some cases they probably were not. But you are then taking that word, that loaded word with full of history, full of suppression and death and all of that, and you're like, no, I'm going to alchemize it. I'm going to take this word back. This is going to be something powerful, because it always has been powerful, but it has almost transmuted. And I would say probably since the repeal of the witchcraft laws, we've been taking it back, and creating a whole new, it's kind of a life, but it's also kind of a movement and a feeling and a rebellion and a resistance around this word. And you mentioned with each generation keeps coming in, and I feel like there needs to be a balance there for me, because I feel like we need the new people, the new fresh new blood in, coming in, bringing ideas, bringing their evolution, because witchcraft has to keep evolving, and that's the point. And at the same time, it's up to people who are not new to kind of be like, welcome, and also here is some information of my many years of experience. And I think the problem in that dynamic is that doesn't happen all the time, or not as often as it should, because you often get newbies who are coming in and they're kind of trying to be like, oh, I know it all, this, and the people over there are getting very irate because they're like, you don't know all. And then there are some people coming in and they're like, I want to learn, I'm enthusiastic, I've got my ideas, and then they coming up against the wall of, well, you don't get to learn, or you don't deserve to learn, or something. And those are the two sort of problem areas that I think clash. Again, because it's very political, because the people who really believe in this, it's a big part of who they are. It's part of identity, which is political.
Yeah. Okay, so to play,
that's a lot, I know.
Yeah, to play off of what you said, okay, so okay, as far as the gatekeepers go with the new blood that's coming in, let me just address that first, because I do agree with you. It's these two groups, right? And there's no middle ground. There's no middle ground for them to walk. So regarding the one group where, you know, they're worried that this wave is going to kind of stomp on their traditions or whatever, like they want to be like traditional gatekeepers, like they want to just cut off the craft or whatever. I think that it's unfair to do that. If someone is coming to you and they really want to learn, then we should be open to sharing our wisdom with them. If that person is not truly open to doing the work, magic itself, the craft itself, will teach them that lesson without I, or any other mentor or teacher having to step in. You know what I mean? Like the craft itself will slap them on the wrist and be like, you did that wrong. So that's like the middle ground that I'm kind of talking about, is that we need to be open and be share some of your secrets. Like, come on, like what are we doing? Like, we want this to grow and evolve and have these numbers, and have faith that the craft itself will weed out the ones who, I use this word loosely, aren't worthy of the craft, aren't worthy of practicing the craft in depth. And, do you know what I mean? Walking
aren't invested, yeah.
Aren't invested, aren't authentically, practicing, And I just have faith in that. Regarding all of the other stuff, you pretty much nailed it. Taking back the power of a word, like a word that was used to oppress people, and people were murdered because of it. And they were murdered, just like you said, they were midwives, or they happened to know too much about plants or foraging, or, just, and so now we are taking back that power. And I find even now, witch is used as an insult. I see it all the time. It's still used as an insult, when mostly men don't have anything else to say about a woman who's acting crazy, or too loud, or she's being too much, or she has an opinion, they call her a witch, or they start calling all these names. And so we're taking back that power, and saying, yeah, I am a witch. I'm standing in this magic, in this power, in all of this pain. And I'm alchemizing it into something else.
And I think that's one reason why gatekeeping can be really dangerous, because a lot of people who come to witchcraft are actually disenfranchised. They feel they have no power, and they're coming to witchcraft to reclaim themselves, and that part of themselves that has always felt other, or has always felt there's more going on with the world than we are told is going on with the world. People who are looking for magic and witchcraft. And so when people kind of then almost mirror all the issues that are going on in society, and they've brought like their patriarchy, or they've brought their racism, or they've brought whatever it is in from other places, and then they're trying to sort of push down others in witchcraft, it creates this weird, disjointed, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's like an amalgamation of hatred, I guess, that has seeped in from other places. I've seen that a lot with, for example, for anybody watching this going, what are you talking about? I've seen it with religious conditioning that comes from outside of witchcraft, and people carry over certain religious conditioning, certain hatreds, certain biases, and then they try and apply that to witchcraft. And like you said, I think you're going to get slapped from the powers that be with witchcraft while doing it. But it's really dangerous in a way to sort of try and fit witchcraft into this model of the oppressor, almost. Like if patriarchy is oppressive, if society and what it teaches us is oppressive, which I think it is, and then witchcraft is rebellion, and then you're trying to sort of merge the two, it's just going to explode, right?
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
Witchcraft is rebellion, and you're absolutely right about, people who seek this out. They are disenfranchised. They have been let down by society. They are looking, not only are they looking for magic, and they're just looking for a place to belong. They're looking for a couple questions to be answered, and then that will ignite the fire in them, and they'll start just voraciously seeking like everyone else did, like just like you and I, we picked up one book at a time, we did one Google search at a time, whatever we had access to, we did that. And it's important to feed that, to nurture that, and allow it to grow, and give them a safe space to come to, but without, giving away all of the secrets at once, because I do believe that, there's levels to this, But I again, it's just that faith, like you said, in the craft itself, that I believe that the powers that be know authenticity, know when someone is being just truly authentic. And so what, they may not say a word properly, they stumble when they, are saying their incantation or whatever. It's about, are they being authentic or not? Are they present in that moment or not? Are they standing in their power, claiming their power or not? Yeah.
I think that actually feeds really nicely into the next question that we wrote down here, which is that you, Jaclyn, discuss being a torchbearer in a lot of your work. And you can find her work on the places that I mentioned before, as well as on House of Twigs. I will mention that one. Is there any other big ones that you want to mention where they can find your work?
No, I mean, Girl God books.
Yeah.
I have some, pieces in there, but same with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. But yeah, those are the two main places: House of Twigs and Nephilim Rising.
Okay. So for people out there, could you describe what it is or what it means to you to be a torchbearer? And I think this feeds really nicely into the energy that we were just talking about.
I agree. So for those who are not familiar with my work, I work with several deities in my practice, but one of the main central deities is Hecate. And I work with different aspects of her, but it was the Phosphoros, or the light bearer, that was the first that really drew me in. And what I mean by torchbearer is it's kind of my voice and my magic and my writing have all become one. They're kind of all intertwined, and they have become this fire, this torch that I carry with me, because I was silenced for so long, and I played small because of abusers and trauma and all of this other stuff. And it was through working with Hecate and going to the crossroads and working in this liminal space that I really started to ignite this voice of truth inside of me. And like, it eventually had nowhere else to go except for out. And once it did, I still don't know what has led to the success that I've had. What has led to that? Because success is relative, it's subjective, right? Like, but people resonate with my work so much, and they're always like, you saved me in my darkest times. Like, you shine so bright. You are so bright. Your words, and that's what I mean by being a torchbearer. I share my pain, share my experiences, share my knowledge and wisdom, whatever I do know. And I want it to help people who may be, I don't know, lost on the path a little bit, may have steered off, and gently guide them back so that they can find their way back to their power. It's just about that for me.
Yeah, there's definitely that vibration, I think, with your work, that when people are authentically seeking, which is something we've described before, and then they find something which authentically resonates with them, and they just know on sight that it's true. They know on sight that it comes from pain, sometimes. I mean, there are lighter quote, and I mean lighter as in not so heavy on the chest for anybody at home. No, I don't mean lightened up witchcraft, because it's a whole mess. We're not getting into it right now, or we'd be here for an hour. But when they know that something has gravitas, when something has that, it's that essence of resilience and rebellion that we're talking about, but it has that, and you can feel it, and you're like, oh, this is powerful. And yeah, the energy just went right through me. So you say, oh, you can feel it like in your bones, and you know that person has been through personal transformation, rebirth, and they have forged themselves using witchcraft and all the other tools in their box that go alongside it, and you can just feel it. You just know. And it's very difficult to really describe what that feeling is, but I feel like when you're listening to somebody and you're like, oh, this person gets it. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. First off, first off, thank you, because I get that same surge of energy when I read your work. So to hear you say that about me, I'm like, don't cry in your first. This is my first video interview, by the way. This is the first one. I've never. I'm
gonna make her cry in the first one, everybody.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But thank you for that. But that's I'm happy that translates through my writing, because I want people to know that there is no like smoke and mirrors. There is no like filter. It's just me and my pain and my trauma and processing it with witchcraft. Witchcraft has been my medicine. It literally saved my life. Yeah. And that's what I do. And so to know that comes through. And again, I don't even think I'm like that great of a writer. Like I feel like there's so many other writers who that imposter syndrome, man, it's real.
Yeah, absolutely real. But I'm just gonna say nonsense. Her writing is amazing. If you haven't already checked it out, where have you been? Go have a look. It's great.
Thank you.
You've written some, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, some of the pieces that are just, there's so many. And I'm just trying, I should have done that beforehand, but my brain was like, because I had a migraine the other day. But there's some pieces and they just hit and you're like, oh. Oh, and they stay with you. That's something else that I've noticed. Some of your pieces keep coming up every so often and they'll come back around and you're like, that's how you know it's good. I've seen this before, but it's back and I'm going to reread it. And there's some that are really, really beautiful. I think some of the Luciferianism ones keep coming back up around, don't they? And really taking a good look at that. I'm trying to think. Well, you're going to have to remind me of some titles, because I know there's the Luciferianism one that comes back around.
All of you can just, if you go to the blog and you just type in Luciferian or Luciferianism, they'll all come up, because they do. They keep coming back around. The Lilith ones, they also, Lessons from the Dark Mother, that comes up.
I was going to say Lilith, and my brain went.
There's The Rise of the Rebellious Woman.
That one. That's the one.
Yes.
That's the one.
Because I talk about several goddesses in that one and how their energy and archetype is coming through. Yes. And that one, I see them come up and I'm like, oh my God. Like I even like, it's still to this day is as exciting and like, is this real? Like pinch me as it was 7 years ago when I started this journey. It's like still, you know what I mean? I don't think I'll ever get used to this. And as I grow and I'm doing collaborations and changing and just doing these things, I'm like, is this real? Like seriously, like, and I know that you relate, because you're going through things too. And it's just like, oh my God, thank you. Like, thank you to the spirits. Like, thank you to ancestors. I
cry every time. Like every time something major happens, I'm there like bawling my eyes out.
Yep.
Don't do it again.
Every nice
comment, I'll cry now.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and that's, it kind of feeds into what we've been talking about anyway, because that's another way you can tell it's important to us, because you're immediately like, oh gods. Like the imposter syndrome as well, actually, whilst it is a shadow, it actually feeds into how important this is to us. Like, am I deserving enough to be here talking with these people, right? It's because you look up to them, you admire them, you know that that's their truth, and that you're like, I know I mean it, I know all of this is important to me, but and what if I do it wrong, and you're worried about your impact on other people, I think. As well, at that point you're like, what if I screw this up, and I and the likelihood of that is not. And even if you did, it would be part of the process. That's part of, I'm a human being, like, which is not the end of it. We're all human beings. And that's, I think, important as well, just to showcase to the world that especially in the world we live in, it's social media and whatnot, that witchcraft is not meant to be perfect all the time. It's not meant to be pretty all the time. In fact, most of the time, in my experience, pretty makes up maybe like 2%. And the rest is hard work.
It's hard work, but what people don't understand is witchcraft is wild. That's just it. It's wild. You have to think of it as just wild, not even just a wild animal, but just wild altogether. And it can't be contained. It was just like how you talked about putting it into a box, trying to stuff it into this box and make it fit. It's not going to fit. How are you going to put it into a box? It isn't. It can't be. It is a wild thing, and you know, it is blood and bone and just dirt, and it's messy, and it's just, that is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think your witchcraft and or spiritual journey has evolved with the dreaded P word, pandemic, and how has that affected witchcraft for you?
Man. I will say that I did not get these questions, like I didn't get them ready in my head beforehand. You know, you did send them through because I have anxiety and I just wanted to know what I was getting into. But the pandemic, okay, first off, the pandemic has just been brutal on my mental health. I just want to acknowledge that, because it is, like you said, where, you know, people do look up to us, and I think that they don't always see that human side to us. And they sometimes think, you know, we're so strong and powerful, and those things are true. But what's also true is that I'm going through the pandemic with all of you too, and it's messing with me and you and all of us just the same. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we're all going through this. But I have been through several existential crises. Crises, that's a proper word. You know, since this whole thing began, if I'm being honest, it kind of, you know, I mean, it's true what they say, you know, in a lot of articles, is that NASA people, they train for this type of isolation. We're not wired for this, and I'm an introvert, guys. Like I don't like to people. I don't like to people at all. You know, it's just I just prefer not. But it's just, I miss the structure, any sense of like normalcy. You know, people are scared of other people, but so went through, you know, kind of not knowing where I fit into the grand scheme of things. But I did find my way back, as I always do. Hecate called me back to the crossroads, and I dove deep. I decided that I was just going to immerse myself into my spirituality. And my spirituality, again, for those who don't know, is not just witchcraft, but it's also Hinduism is part of my spiritual practice. And I just dove deep. I started to, you know, really start reading and researching all over again, like almost starting from scratch. I rebuilt altars, took altars down, redid them, redid idols and different things like that. My practice is much more me-centered now, just to help me get through my days. Whereas before, I'm a giver. I'm like a giver. I literally will pour from an empty cup. And my magic was always centered around making sure that everyone was okay, that loved ones, that people, the collective, whomever were okay. But now it's split in half. It's making sure that the collective is good and sending some energy that way, but also making sure that I'm okay. So it's been an evolution. And it's been heavy, you know. I work with death deities, and that's been heavy. You know, there's been this huge flux of death, and it's been a lot of rapid change, and I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure. Oh
yeah. I mean, I know the thing that's been getting me through is the fact that we can still go out into nature, and being able to go out into the woods and things. I mean, it's always been a very important part for me, being able to just, I'm an introvert too, And I was saying, when was I saying, like the other day, I was like, I'm all right till you get to about 13 people. About over 13 people, it stops being witchy and I get twitchy, is how I was putting it. But I've always been one of those people that needs time to myself and hermits off and goes out into nature. But the pandemic had this weird would it be claustrophobia or agoraphobia? I suppose I got to the point where I was almost afraid to go outside. It was both claustrophobic and agoraphobic at the same time. And it was like this fear that you would get picked up by the police if you were outside and you weren't supposed to be, was like looming at one point. And I got to the point where I was almost afraid to leave my own house. And then I was like, you're going to have to nip this in the bud, or it's going to become a part of you. And I remember making a very conscious decision at that point to make sure I went into the woods or something, you know, even if it's just a walk around where there are trees, even if it wasn't into a full wood, as much as possible. And that's been life-saving.
Yeah.
Because trees have seen it all. They're like, oh, it'll all be over before you know it. Like, trees are just like nonplussed in their energy. And I'm like, thank goodness for trees, honestly. I mean, I'm deepening my path anyway. I started my priestess training this year in Glastonbury, and to have my official, my official thing. I've been doing this for a very long time, so it's not new to me, but it does have some interesting differences in perspective from that side of things, and that has been life-saving too, because you're going through priestess training in the weirdest time to be doing it. And the woman that runs our one, she was like, I'm convinced you're all movers and shakers, because to come to it at this point takes something else. And I was like, well, there's no pressure at all. But yeah, nature and remembering to rest has been a big thing, because it's so bizarre to me that you feel like you're not doing anything or not doing as much as you would be, but you're more exhausted. And it's a mental exhaustion mostly, but it goes bone deep and the body makes it real.
Yes.
And you can be taking it on from outside yourself and from within. So then you're like doubly piled under, and you're like, and then everything just goes, like mentally like you break. And I haven't had a mental break, obviously, but I have had some serious bouts of depression because of all of this. And knowing that you're not disconnected from people, but still feeling completely disconnected from people is a horrible place to be in.
It is. It's just, like you said about just getting out into nature. I'm sorry, I have a lot to say right now. If it wasn't for my dog, I got a dog 2 years ago. I rescued a black dog thanks to Hecate and her guidance. I sometimes question her telling me to do that, but I go outside, and it's like you said, I do have agoraphobia. Outside of the pandemic, I do have it. So getting outside into nature has been a huge help for me as well. It's just, if one thing is a constant, it's that the trees are there. The sun will be there, the fresh air will be there, the birds will be there. However, what I wanted to say is, when you were talking about all of this, I love hikes, I love all of that, just like you do outside of the pandemic. But have you noticed that nature itself has even felt different? Like when you're out and you're on your walks and stuff, like I obviously the psychic chatter and stuff, for those of us who are highly intuitive, it's a little bit quieter on more days, and then on some days it's just deafening because it's so loud. But nature itself feels different. It's like there's a different song coming from the trees now, and I don't really even know how to describe it. You know what I mean? But I'm wondering if you picked up on that too, because I notice it on my walks all the time.
There it is. And for me, on one hand, I feel like it's because nature can breathe a bit more. So, which is interesting as a parallel, because we as human beings can't breathe as easily right now. And
Right.
maybe there's something in there about how human beings en masse don't revere nature. Most people who are watching this will, and are, you know, are going to be, oh, well, I do, and I believe in the causes of the earth and taking care of the earth as much as we can, and this is the way that I do it. And I'm not taking that away from anybody who is doing it, but human beings en masse don't. They see the earth as dead and a resource and something that we can just keep taking from, right? And rather than putting energy back, rather than replanting things, rather than developing a relationship first, asking permission, all of these things, because to me, you know, plants and trees are just as alive as we are and as animals are, and more so in certain cases because they've been around so long and they've seen so much and they have a depth of wisdom. But I can rant about this, so I'm going to try really really hard not to, but because they are more alien to our ideas of what life looks like, we either don't understand, don't want to, and I mean we as the human race rather than we as spiritual people who do want to, we disconnect from it. We just disconnect from everything around us, and we're in our boxes. Out there is out there. Nature has become somewhere to go to, rather than a part of what we are and a part of what that interconnection of ecosystem.
That hit what you just said, that like hit here when you just, yes, nature is somewhere that you go to. Ooh.
Yeah. And this is why I talk about everything in terms of ecosystem. This is why I talk about spiritual ecosystem, because the way that spirit, in my head anyway, the way that we're all connected through the spiritual ecosystem is how we're meant to live in the physical ecosystem, but we don't. And I feel like that's where a lot of spiritual wounding comes from. Not all of it, obviously, but a lot, because of that disconnection that a lot of us feel and can't really explain, and then we feel better when we go into nature, right? Yeah. It's a whole other thing.
Like a whole other video, a whole series. Yes, it's a whole thing. But
I'm going to pull it back and move on to a different question, because that's a whole, I will be here for hours on end. But I mean, this kind of feeds into this question, because I've kind of given one reason why this would be. So why do you think it is important for witches to resist the status quo, as many of us are doing? How so, or why not? So I've just kind of covered one of those through like ecosystem.
I love how the questions are like just naturally like flow, like everything's just flowing into the next. Just have to say that. I'm sitting here playing my crystals. Okay, so I think everyone should be fighting against the status quo at this point. You know, like I don't think it should be just synonymous like with just like the witchcraft community or the spiritual community. But why do I think it's important for us to go against the status quo? Because man, we got some systems that really have to be broken down. Like they are not serving anyone besides one particular group of people. You know, like if you're not like a rich white old dude, like you're not, like how is this system serving you in any way, shape, or form? And I'm talking about like the entire system, like from government just all the way down. And it's time for us to fight back. It's time for people to start having a voice in their government and in their politics, because that's how they live. Like it's I don't identify as a Satanist, but I cheer and applaud the Satanic Temple every single time that they use their power and their might and their money and their resources to go after bigger corporations or, you know, things that me and you couldn't do. And I really respect that. But going against the status quo, just one chip at a time, just one person waking up at a time, it will eventually shake the foundation of the patriarchy, of racism, of white supremacy, of, you know, all of these things that don't serve anyone anymore besides that one group of people, you know what I mean? It's time to just break it all. It's time to just shatter it all. And that pretty much sums it up. I mean, that is the number one reason is why we have to go against what society expects from us.
And I think apathy is one of their major weapons against the human populace,
100%.
because so many people are apathetic. So many people think that it doesn't affect them directly, so they don't care. That's how the Conservatives got into power again in this country. Is well, it doesn't affect me, so meh. And it's just like, oh, it does, firstly, but even if it didn't, are we so disconnected from other human beings? Like,
right. That's the whole thing. Like, where did that happen? Like, okay, it doesn't affect you, but it is killing somebody else. And that matters enough. Like, that in and of itself matters enough to me. So like, I'm like you, I don't understand when people don't understand. Like, I'm like, what? Like, how don't you see this? Like, how don't you see what I'm seeing? You know,
and they make it out to be weak. They're like, if you care about other people, you're weak, you're a snowflake, or whatever it is in America. And like that, and it's slightly different in the UK, but you still see it. I mean, and it's just like, when did caring about other people and like not viewing society as pie, right? I say this all the time, like, society is not pie. Because they want equal rights doesn't mean less rights for you.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Again, another video that we could like, but that to me is some of I think for me the reason to fight the status quo is because otherwise we're going to wipe out the human race. That's what's going to happen. That if we don't all start working together to protect all of us, including the planet and all the spirits that reside within it, we're going to kill the human race. And the earth will be fine. She'll start over again like she has throughout history, but we won't be here.
Right.
And that fills me with a sadness as well, to think that, you know, so many generations down the line, that might be at the end of the human race, because we don't care enough about each other right now. And it's just like, why like you said, I don't understand it at all. I mean, some people have been like, oh, you're too naive and you care too much about other people and people will take advantage. And I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Be a complete asshat that doesn't care about people, like.
Right.
Anyway. So
I mean, I can't turn it off, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like you, like, I can't turn it off. Like, I just care.
And you wouldn't want to. That's the other thing.
Right. Like, to be honest, I rather feel everything in all of its full capacity than feel nothing.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'd rather be awake and aware of all of the truths, no matter how ugly they are, than be blind to them. And I don't, it seems so simple to me and to you, you know, like, and to most of the people watching this video, it just seems like common sense, like, this is why we're here. But for the majority, you know, of the people around us, like, they're in their bubble and they're living their life, and they don't care. It's just they don't care.
And a lot of that is a lot of that is choice, first and foremost. But I think a lot of it is just, there's so much conditioning from so many different places that people think that that's normal and that's how it's supposed to be. And that's how it's always been, so that's how it's supposed to be. And it's like,
I hate that. Okay, boomer. Oh, I hate that. The worst.
So the last question kind of feeds into this a bit. So we've been talking about some of the deities that you work with, such as Hecate. And some people call these dark goddesses. Now, again, I put this in quotation marks because I hate this. But I do feel the presence of death goddess, especially, as you mentioned, and death gods, goddesses, has been very powerful over the last few years. They've been very prominent for the last few years. And I mean, I can reel off names. You've seen a lot of Hades energy.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of Hecate energy. The Morrigan, who I work with in particular, Caradwyn, Persephone. I've seen a lot of people coming to these gods, and a lot of energy and witchcraft work and discussions maybe around these energies, around these gods and goddesses. Why do you think that is, and how has working with these energies helped you over the last years in particular?
I think that these energies are around more because I think that they're needed, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I originally started working with dark deities, which again, you know, I use in quotes too, because I've always been considered too much. You know, I've always been very heavy, analytical, always lost in thoughts in my subconscious and all of this. I just wanted to understand, again, darkness, shadows. I wanted to understand the non-love and light side of things. I started to work with Santa Muerte, first off because I heard her call and it just became undeniable, but also because before I started working with her, I had this really unhealthy idea and concept of death. Like, I was scared of death, to be honest. So I started working with death in order to understand. Do you know what I mean? I think that these deities are around, and these deities are there to in a way assist us humans in kind of understanding some of these scarier shadow sides to life in general, you know, because the one guarantee in life is that you're going to die, right? And everyone's kind of weary of it. You don't know where you're going to go, what's going to happen. And so how have they helped me? To be honest, without the deities that I work with, Lucifer, Lilith, Hecate, Santa Muerte, Shiva, Kali, I wouldn't be as strong as I am in this moment, like this year, particularly like this last pandemic, this whole thing, 18 months or whatever. My mom and I did have COVID. You know, I am dealing with health issues now, some related to COVID, some not. And it's just, these deities have helped transition me through the dark night of the soul, if you will. And I think that's what they're here to do. You know, not only are people physically dying, but ways of life are dying, institutions are dying, sometimes people's dreams are dying. Like, there's all different levels to it. And I think that they're here to help us transition into this new era, whatever it's going to look like after, whatever after is from this pandemic. You know,
and we don't know what it's going to be, and that is probably the essence of death in and of itself, isn't it? Because that's why a lot of people are panicking, because the rules are going out the window, because, like we said, people get very stuck into this idea of the way things have always been, and that's not going to be applicable for very much. Well, it's not applicable now, and so it's not going to be applicable going forward. And that has that death energy to it, doesn't it? Like, not knowing what's happening. You've got no roadmap.
And that's I mean, for even, you know, the well-traveled spiritualist, that's scary. It's scary not knowing, you know, like, and so for someone who doesn't have any kind of like spiritual anchor, and, you know, even being an atheist, you have some type of anchor in your belief. You know, if you don't have that, I'm sure that you're having a real hard time right now. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get all like, oh, well, you have to rely on this, but I feel like if you don't have like some sort of spiritual practice, whether that's freaking atheism, witchcraft, or Christianity or something, I feel like you're flopping like a fish right now. Like, you're having a hard time, and you know what I mean? Because you need that. You need that. You at least have that at the end of the day. If all else fails, we know that we have witchcraft. We know that we have magic. We know that we have these deities, the ancestors. We know that we have those things.
And maybe that's some of why witchcraft and paganism has been growing at such a rate as
100%.
well,
Yeah.
because we still have the earth,
Right.
even in these times, which we've mentioned. You know, we've still had the trees, we still had the fresh air, and maybe
the moon
people,
is still cycling, the
yeah,
planets are still doing their thing, like everything is going on, which I think is another weird like juxtaposition that we find ourselves in, is because like all of this stuff is still happening, like the seasons are still changing, but we as humans are at a standstill.
Yeah, stuff.
And we're almost to the point, I mean, when I see people outside when I'm walking my dog or whatever, and he's a little chihuahua, by the way, and I know that they're demons, but you know, you don't got to be scared of them. People are scared of people. And I'm wondering what that effect is going to, how that's going to affect us in the long run, and also how it's going to affect children. I mean, there's like generations right now that are missing important milestones in socialization because they can't be. So I'm wondering what the long-term effects of this isolation is. I mean, I think it's going to be for years to come.
I've been thinking about this too. I live with a family, so they have a 6-year-old, and you can see it impacting his mental health for starters. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, I feel like the essence, and this feeds into exactly what we've been talking about, the essence of rebellion against the establishment within them is going to be massive, because you've got people who have been denied their you know, people who were denied their A-levels and GCSEs, and so their educational testing bit, if you don't know what I mean, in other countries, that gets you your qualifications from leaving school. And a lot of them were either denied that, or they had that messed around with, or they like had all of their grades brought down. In one case, there was a massive thing in the UK where they brought everybody's grades down, and people went nuts because they were stealing the future from these kids. And they went back and they fixed it, but those kids are never going to forget that. They will never forget that happened to them. They will never forget that the slow reaction in this country, and terrible reaction in this country compared to other places in the world, failed them, and meant that they lost time with their friends, they lost time with their socialization, they lost time with their education. And I feel like I think people are going to struggle in some ways, and I also feel like that rebellion is going to be a seed, because they've 100%. Seen how it doesn't work.
Well, also I think about it in, because I have nieces and nephews, so I think about it in a few different groups. I think about the young ones, like the little toddlers who are missing milestones in preschool. Then I think about, like, you know, elementary school and their socialization they're missing out on, and you know, and then we start going forward, and I worry about like the high school seniors. First off, the high school seniors from last year, they were unable to have like prom and then graduation, but then you have the seniors this year, and in most states, in this country at least, they're still locked down. They're still doing virtual lessons and stuff. Well, when they graduate, they're going to be 18. They're going to be able to vote. Their voices are going to be able to be heard. And I wonder, they're going to feel just these experiences have been ripped away from them, right? These experiences that they have worked for 12 years of schooling or whatever, and they're like, yes, freedom, and then it's taken away from them. You're absolutely right. It's a seed for rebellion. And it goes back to being like gatekeepers and stuff. That seed of rebellion needs to be handled carefully. You need to make sure that the rebellion is the kind of authentic rebellion that we want to be, and not angry rebellion, right? So that's why when we have these influx of new people coming to us, we have to be a little bit more willing to share some of our information and knowledge and stuff with them, to nurture that seed and not have it be bad shit. You know what I mean?
Well, because if people come to you with the essence of rebellion burning in them, and you try and refuse them, you're going to become the thing to rebel against.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then they're just going to go harder, and they're just going to go to an extreme where they may not necessarily have to do that. You know, they're let them find their own way 100%. And you don't have to think like me. You don't have to believe like me. But we have to know that they're coming to us because there is a seed already planted. So we really have to like think of ourselves like gardeners in a way. Like we really have to nurture that seed. You know what I mean? Because they, or else we're just adding more to the establishment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think that's a lovely place to stop. So thank you very much for coming and talking with me today. And for everybody else, like I said, but just to reiterate, everything will be down below in the down bar. So if you want to go check out more from the Nephilim Rising, you can find her shop, you can find her blog, you can find all of her work down below. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.